Hey Wargamers, Games Workshop has sent out their preview copies of The Greater Good, the latest Psychic Awakening book, to a bunch of people. Now, while I'm not one of those people, I do know some of them. So Rob from Preferred Enemies, it was so nice as to take some pictures of his copy and send them over to me to review. So I'm going to go through the different rules that we have in The Greater Good in a series of videos. This is going to be the first one. We're going to look at the Sept tenets of the Tau Empire that you can use to build your own custom Septs in this video, and then we'll go through all the other things in different videos. So just if you're new to the channel, subscribe. That way you won't miss any of those upcoming videos. All right, so these are Sept tenets. They are custom Sept tenets. These are something different than the existing tenets that you have for things like Farsight Enclaves, Viewer Law, Tau, Sept. All those are separate from this. So you can either choose to go with one of those, or you can make your own by combining two of these special rules in this 2 pages of the Greater Good. So let's go over these one by one. The first is Turbojets. It says add 1 to advanced rolls made for jetpack units with this tenet. Add 2 inches to the move characteristic of jetpack models with this tenet. So that's pretty good. I mean, I like that. That has some nice utility to it. I think this is kind of a consolation prize for Jump Shoot Jump, or for having a special rule for jetpack keyword, right? So something that we've always been looking forward to since 8th edition hit was something to do with jetpacks. This does something with jetpacks. It gives you additional maneuverability, which is nice, but it's not jump, shoot, jump. So, I mean, I think it's a nod of the hat to that, but, certainly something that would be useful if you were bringing all jetpack units, but, not something that I think is at all on the scale of competing with some of the other tenets available to you. Dedication to the cause. Add 1 to the leadership characteristic of models with this tenet. Nice. That's kind of part of the Sakia Sept right now. So, if you liked that part of Sakia, but you didn't want to, go with Sakia, you could take this. Again, fine, but not stellar. Soldiers in arms, increase the range for the Greater Good ability to 9 inches for units with this tenet. This is one of the ones that was previewed in the Warhammer community article for custom Septs. And I'll say now what I said then is that this is nice, right? Having for the Greater Good is one of the, larger strengths of playing Tau. But in order for this to compensate for having for the Greater Good on 5s as opposed to 6s, you would have to get at least twice as many units in that bubble, which you can do having that additional 3 inches added to the radius, but it's still more situational, it's more variable. I'd rather have the increased reliability of hitting on 5s than potentially having more shots overall. So I think having soldiers in arms is a nice semi-Tau Sept option, but not something that's going to compete with rolling on 5s overall. Stabilization systems. When resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by a battlesuit model with this tenet, that model does not suffer the penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons. This one is pretty good. This is, again, something that was previewed. This is clearly meant for broadsides. Broadsides are really the only battle suit that has a heavy weapon to fire, so at least within the standard codex. So having this is really meant to be for a specialized attachment of broadsides. You wouldn't want to bring this necessarily on a battalion that you're filling with all sorts of other stuff, because they're just probably not going to benefit from this. But if you bring like a spearhead with a bunch of broadsides in it, this is something that you would actually really want, because it addresses one of the fundamental weaknesses of broadsides, and that is their lack of mobility. It allows you to move and shoot as if you had a target lock, essentially. So you get a free target lock. That's awesome. You could then take advanced targeting systems, shield generators, without feeling that opportunity cost as you would if you didn't have this tenet, which is nice. I think that this is one of the stronger options that you have going into a custom Sept. Hardened warheads says, when resolving an attack made with a high-yield missile pod, seeker missile, or smart missile system by a model with this tenet, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that weapon by 1 for that attack. This is, again, one of the stronger ones, especially if you were bringing a spearhead with a bunch of broadsides. although there are plenty of other suits that are going to have missiles, Riptides, smart missile systems, looking at commanders, or even crisis suits having missile pods, this is something that is really going to work well for broadsides because they just have more missiles, right? So having that additional AP can make quite a big difference in the damage output of those weapons, especially when we're looking at standard missile pods. Having that additional -1 on a smart missile system is also very nice. If we're thinking about stacking this with an advanced targeting system, that means that smart missile systems are strength 5 -2 and ignores cover. That's pretty nasty, right? That means those Primaris Marines hiding in ruins aren't going to be having those 2-up saves. They're going to be having a 5-up save. Pretty sneaky overall, pretty valuable in that context, especially if you're bringing lots of smart missile systems, and even more so if you're bringing other types of missiles. So I think this is probably one of the stronger ones, and not something that you would necessarily bring for your whole army, but really something you're using for a focused detachment, something that you're looking to sprinkle into your army, and you want it for a very particular purpose, and that purpose is missiles. So if that's you, then this might be something you want to look into. Sophisticated Command Net. When resolving an attack made by a vehicle model with this tenet against a unit that has 1 or more marker light counters, reroll a wound roll of 1. So this is something that's really going to be useful on hammerheads, right? The problem is that Longstrike, his abilities are Sept locked, and so you're not going to be able to use his aura to boost hammerheads and also use this Sept tenet to boost those same hammerheads. That is a problem. I think that's a weakness of this, is that you can't double dip like that. Now, some of those benefits are going to be, just totally fine because you can take care of them with marker lights, and this works when you have marker lights. So you can kind of ignore it in that way, but really the long strike buff is good enough that you're going to want to take long strike with your hammerheads, and therefore you're not going to use this custom Sept. Of course, hammerheads aren't the only vehicle in the army, and I think there are actually many other vehicles besides hammerheads that would benefit more strongly from this. I'm primarily thinking of things like Sky Rays or Piranhas are going to benefit from this pretty darn well. Think about those Piranhas with fusion blasters. You don't see them very often right now because you always roll a 1 to wound with those things, and this helps alleviate that issue. This is also going to be pretty good on things like Tiger Sharks or Barracudas, where you're going to have marker light support on them, but you might roll those ones, and there's not a way to mitigate that other than this tenet. So I could imagine this being something very useful in a dedicated detachment for Piranhas specifically. Those other things like a Tiger Shark, you really would have to build. You'd really have to build a whole list around in order to justify bringing this tenet and a detachment full of things that benefit from it. But a detachment with Piranhas, totally doable, and this is something that could work out really well for them. Piranhas aren't going to necessarily really want to be in a detachment for these other things. They don't necessarily have a whole lot to gain from other Septs. I think Farsight Enclaves is probably going to be a really strong contender for Piranhas now, but if they're not doing that, if they are looking at a custom Sept, this is a great tenet for them. Hybridized weaponry. Add 4 inches to the range characteristic of assault and grenade weapons models with this tenet are equipped with. This does not apply to prototype weapon systems. Too bad. There's definitely some prototype weapons that would be nice to mix with this. But adding 4 inches to assault weapons is certainly not bad. That means things like fusion blasters are now going to be hitting at 22 inches as opposed to 18. That makes a difference. Any of your crisis suit weapons are going to be hitting at additional 4 inches, which is very nice, especially if you're considering looking at deep striking and things like that. Granted, I think that the benefits conferred by Farsight Enclaves now after the rework outweigh these, and so makes this a harder sell. But overall, still a solid option, especially for a detachment that is looking at crisis suits, looking at stealth suits, looking at maybe breachers even. So something like that is not bad here. Gifted pilots. If in your movement phase a vehicle or monster model with this tenet does not move or moves a distance less than half its move characteristic until the end of turn, when resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by that model, re-roll a wound roll of 1. I think this is a better tenet than Sophisticated Command Net. You are not constrained to have marker lights like you are with Sophisticated Command Net, and it applies to monsters as well, which is good, right? That means things like your Riptide is going to be able to benefit from this, whereas whereas they're not going to benefit from Sophisticated Command Net. So having this apply to vehicles and monsters, and then allow you to have that half movement option to get the same benefit, I think just makes Gifted Pilots an overall better tenet than Sophisticated Command Net. Still probably one of the better ones of this whole slate, I would say. Advanced power cells. Tactical drones with this tenet have a move characteristic of 10. That is cool. I like the idea of just having fast drones. It's something that if I was bringing a detachment with, let's say, a Cold Star Commander or a bunch of piranhas or something that, I don't know, like even a Uvara, right? If I had something where I needed drones to keep up with somebody fast, this would be nice. However, of course, the caveat with that is that, or the catch-22 with that, is that the person that they're trying to keep up with would also have to have this custom Sept, and therefore I'm giving up a bunch of really good things that they're just not benefiting from in this option. So from a competitive standpoint, this probably isn't going to be a winner, but if you are going for a drone army, right, if you're looking for a narrative drone army, which is something that you see online fairly often, this is definitely down your alley, right? If you are all about drones, then this is a tenet for you. Maneuvering thrusters. A battlesuit with this tank can advance when it falls back. Between this and the jets, the turbojets, it very much feels like a consolation prize for jump, shoot, jump. They're not giving it to us, but they allow you to move faster, and then when you fall back, they do allow you to do that faster too. So certainly not bad. Again, probably one of the better ones if you are thinking about bringing a suit heavy list, which looks like it's going to be kind of a thing going forward. So yeah, I think this is good. It again doesn't necessarily outweigh the benefits that you get from other tenets, and that's really we only have one tenet left. I'm not going to say it again that I think these overall are very strong, or at least some of them are strong. I don't think any of them are strong enough to replace the existing tenets, especially now with the Farsight Enclave stratagems. These tenets are nice for specific detachments in very limited scenarios, but if you're looking for a single tenet for your whole army, I don't think you're going to craft one with these. That's going to be a very competitive list. I think these are going to be for either narrative lists or very specialized attachments that you're going to piece together a few units that you want to benefit from some rules that you're okay with not taking the main Sept tenet. But overall, these are nice. They can be good in certain situations, not going to be something that you're going to have your whole army constructed underneath. And with that, we get to the final tenet, Upgunned. Burst cannon models with this tenet are equipped with an armor penetration characteristic with -1. So yeah, that's nice. I like having -1 on burst cannons. If you think about that on stealth suits, you can give them advanced targeting and then they're -2. That's a really good kind of damage profile on a relatively low cost model. So I could see that. Notably, it says burst cannon, and that would not apply to things like hazard suits with double-barreled burst cannons, right? That's a different unit entry, so it wouldn't count. But burst cannons on stealth suits, on crisis suits, that does work here. So I could see that is nice. If you are bringing a unit of stealth suits, maybe you want to bring upgunned and hybridized weaponry. That would be pretty sweet. 22-inch burst cannons hitting at -2 AP. I can live with that. That's pretty nice. But again, I don't think it's necessarily going to be something that you build your whole army around. So overall, the best ones here I think can be Upgunned, Hybridized weaponry, maybe gifted pilots. You know, it's hard to say, but certainly stabilization systems and hardened warheads are ones that I am looking at as potential things to sprinkle into an army. Really, the number one thing that I think is going to be seen here is taking some of these tenets for broadside detachments. Every other application, I think there are far better options with other tenets, but for broadsides, I'm a little tempted. I want to see how this plays out. So let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your favorite custom Sept tenets? Are you looking at using them in your list? And have you gotten a chance to play with them yet? If you have, I'd love to hear how it went. As always, thanks for watching and happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over on Patreon. These are the people that really help drive the channel and make things happen. So special thanks to Shifty, Dallas Ellis, Jim Bob, Scott Heater, Nick Steele, Tao Oswald, Jackson, Stephen Cohen, Eric Jackson, Michael Byrne, Zealous Brimstone, Jared Egler, and Chris Kessler.